Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we are finally going to be talking about the newest project from the Jericho Jackson duo called Khrysis and Elzhi, or Jericho Jackson. Man alive, I wanted to get this review out a lot earlier. And that's the problem with certain indie hip-hop projects. You might see the duo name and shrug unless you know who it is. And when I heard it was actually the Detroit MC Elzhi teaming up with veteran indie producer Khrysis to assemble a project, I definitely wanted to get in front of it, but it fell back on my schedule and I just never got the chance to push it up higher before now. Not ideal by any means, but considering how this seems to have flown under the radar for a lot of critics, both on and off of YouTube, alright, better late than never. And while most of you should know Elzhi from his work in Slum Village or his mid-2000s breakthrough The Preface, newer listeners might have caught his 2016 release Lead Poison, the sort of layered hip-hop overflowing with great storytelling that hooked me very quickly, even if I wouldn't quite call it a personal favorite of mine that year in 2016. Now with Khrysis, hell, dig into the liner notes of Justice League, Little Brother, Rhapsody, and Jean Grey, and you'll see a lot of credits going back to the early 2000s. If used the sort of textured, gritty, jazz-influenced samples that would be a natural backdrop for Elzhi to just dominate and flow his ass off. So alright, with them teaming up for a tight collection of songs just under 40 minutes, I had a lot of high hopes for this. So what are we gonna get from Khrysis and Elzhi, or Jericho Jackson? Honestly, I'm of a few minds on this album. The majority of them pretty positive, but also confronting some circumstances that I'm not really sure could have been avoided. For one, given the length and the tightly structured bars and a lot of that old school production that feels kind of modern and textured, but definitely paying its dues to the past, it's really hard for me not to make a subconscious parallel to the new F.R.I.E.N.D.S record which just came out and I reviewed not long ago, which would be fine if I thought they were equally as good, or if I thought that Elzhi and Khrysis had surpassed Lead Poison 2 years ago. And while I do not think that it does either, this project remains a little puzzling for me. The bars and the wordplay sharp as ever, but the focus a little less so, which is why the artistic digressions, they do make sense, but seem to add up to a little less than the sum of their parts. Again, I think this is a really good project, but I'm not quite convinced it's a great one, no matter how much I desperately want it to be. And let me make this abundantly clear. If you're coming to this album just to watch Elzhi dump a lot of colorful and creative bars on display, you're gonna get it. You're gonna be satisfied. His flow still owes a considerable debt to Nas, but when the rhymes connect and the storytelling instincts really come to the forefront like on 17, you get the sort of layered wordplay that paints a very vivid picture, and I definitely respect that. And as with Lead Poison, Elzhi's most complex and thought-provoking material circles his creative process and his paranoia. From the tangled what-ifs of overthinking that I could definitely relate to the ruthless string of braggadocious punchlines on Breguets, or Self-Made, or his verse on Talkin' 'Bout. Now, the paranoia doesn't always stick or feel the most original. Friends might be well structured with the cute acronym of fake relationships involving enemies needing disguises, but beyond the bitter history and some of the storytelling, it doesn't really delve deeper or add up to more than what you would expect. And Cuffin' Season, while the larger point of the song is greed, the second verse opens up with a digression about how a lesbian pretends to be straight to hustle some guy. It just comes across in really poor taste, not exactly framed with a lot of nuance, even if it did happen. Or you get cases where the nuance is there, but it just doesn't connect as strongly as it could, like on Listen, where Elzhi describes a failed relationship by reminiscing on all the things that they did together and what might have been, and it really feels really well developed and pretty cute and relatable, and you could interpret Amber Navran's hook as a response to him that he should have just listened to her from the start, but it's framed in a way where it could have just been a romantic sentiment on the hook, and it lacks a little bit more impact than I was hoping, even though I do think it's one of the better songs here. And that's the weird thing with this album. The details, they're fleshed out. The bars have some layered subtlety. For instance, I love the line on the hook of Self-Made, how my pen bleed while yours be blood clotting, and how it highlights the link between writing bars and keeping the wound open in one's art, which on later tracks is juxtaposed against his very real quest for self-improvement on to-do lists and briquettes. But it doesn't feel like it adds up to more beyond that. A lot of detailed execution that builds to something without the same weight that you would think. And you know what? That would be fine enough. There are plenty of underground MCs who built their careers out of flexing their cleverness and lyricism, except with the extended inclusion of lecture samples on songs like the intro or the second half of 17. You're left thinking that it's trying to present itself as carrying a fair bit more weight instead of just letting the stories speak for themselves. It comes across as a bit overwrought in points, and I'm I'm not sure that's the best idea and feel for a record like this. They could have just relaxed and it could have hit harder. So alright, fine. It's a little bit more lightweight than I was hoping, but the rapping's still terrific, and it manages to reveal more intricate lyrical details with every single listen. Although I do question why Khrysis felt the need to take up a verse in the hook on Talking About. Not because he's a bad MC or doesn't have a nice voice or flow, and he does, but he can't help but be outshone on the mic by Elzhi. His strength is really in the production, which I wish I liked a fair bit more. And yes, I will wholeheartedly admit part of this is me nitpicking a very specific element that the majority of people probably won't notice, but the audiophile in me was repeatedly bugged by this, so here goes. Remember when Blue put out Good to Be Home 4 years ago, and the mastering of the drums was so damn inconsistent and lacking? Well, that's certainly not the issue with Khrysis, if only because he goes in the complete opposite direction and takes a very textured, pretty impressive bass beat on some songs that is mixed in a way where it has an interference pattern with the vocals from Elzhi. Or the beat is so heavy, it muddles or blows out part of the low end in Elzhi's voice. Sometimes it's the bass, sometimes it's the bass guitar, and it's really distracting. And yes, I listened to this on 3 different systems with the highest quality files off Tidal I could possibly get. It was consistent across it, and I fully understand if this is just an issue that bugs me, but man, it got distracting. Especially when you consider that so many of the drum lines and beats and bass lines are really damn good. That's a really damn frustrating thing. I like the richer horn sections that Khrysis provides on songs like Self-Made or Listen or Breguets, or even just the deeper accents on Overthinking that sound really great. Combined with a real texture given to a lot of the beats and overall production and the arranged instrumentation, there's a thick, smooth jazz vibe with a little bit of grit behind it that plays really well opposite Elzhi's delivery. And while I didn't really like the scratchy shrillness of the synth line on Friends, that sort of tone, it's really in the minority. A lot of this production is really smooth. But again, this is where the mixing becomes an issue, because for as lush as some of those samples and arranged instrumentals can feel, when the beat is so much thicker and heavier, you lose some of that greater melodic presence that could make these songs more catchy. With how brittle the rest of the arrangement is on Cuffin' Season being the biggest example. And you know what? While that can work for a lot of hip-hop, if it's mixed to interfere with the vocal line, that becomes a little bit of a problem. I appreciate the immersion and the texture, but it got distracting for me. It just didn't come together. But even still, I really do want to praise this. Even songs like Friends, which I don't really like, they're still decent tunes. There's not really a dud here. But if I'm looking for greatness, I think there were some parts of this record that could have used a once-over or a little bit more refinement in post, both in the writing or production. It's certainly close to greatness, which is why I'm giving this a 7 out of 10, and totally a recommendation if you're into this sort of jazz touch production and wordplay and you're not as much of a nitpicking jerk as I am. But whether it's by a close comparison in my mind or parts that just didn't coalesce for me, it just didn't get all the way there. Still, I am a fan of both Elzhi and Khrysis, so yeah, I know I'm late to the punch, but if you're curious and this flew under your radar, worth a listen. Check it out. It's definitely worth it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know I'm late to the punch here, but hey, you want to buy the record? Links in the description below, and I got the poll up there. I know all you diehard Elzhi fans are going to call me out on this, but still, I wanted this to click so much more with me, it just didn't quite get there. It was close, but not quite there. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. Still a little congested, that's why my voice is a little bit raspy. But hey, if you guys want to support this channel or get involved in my scheduling process so this doesn't come out as late as it did, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right there, but till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.